In this video, you will find about the high-profile murder of a young Irish girl that shocked the whole country. This happened in broad daylight and in front of witnesses. The incident caused shock and anger among Irish society. We will analyze the details of this event and try to understand how this could happen. Ashling Murphy was born in 1998, the youngest of 3 children, and the family lived in Blueball, Ireland. It is a quiet and pleasant place very close to Dublin. The girl grew up surrounded by love and affection from an early age. The girl's father played the bagpipes and violin, and her daughter followed in his footsteps and began to study traditional Irish music. From school, the girl joined the youth choir and later the orchestra. She toured Ireland and the UK performing folk music at major events. Later, the girl entered the university and at the same time became a first-grader teacher. Teachers and students loved Ashling. She was very energetic, kind, and creative. The 23-year-old teacher had a boyfriend named Ryan and had been dating him for over 6 years. The young people sincerely loved each other and often discussed the future, marriage, and children. They were planning to go on a trip, but unfortunately these dreams were not destined to come true. At about 2 p.m., January 12, 2022, the teacher's workday ended. Afterwards, Ashling planned to run along the Grand Canal in Tullamore. The Grand Canal was quite a busy place for runners, as there was a specially equipped path, including one suitable for walking. That day, Ashling went home after school to change for a run. Her mother asked her not to run that day, but the girl assured her that she was old enough to take care of herself and that there was no danger in it. Ashling left, and that was the last time her mother saw her alive. About an hour after the girl left the house, 2 random runners who were also warming up on the Grand Canal called emergency services. They reported seeing a menacing-looking man attack one of the girls as she ran along the path. The women said the victim was still alive at the time. She screamed and desperately resisted, but her strength was clearly unequal. Dispatchers directed police officers to the indicated location. When the police arrived at the canal area, they, with the help of witnesses, discovered the body of a young girl who no longer showed signs of life. There were cuts all over her face and neck, and the hair on her head was matted with dried blood. The doctors who arrived at the scene tried to resuscitate the girl for 10 minutes, but everything was unsuccessful, and they declared her death. The body of the murdered woman was sent for examination. Her throat was cut so that she was numb, so she could not scream for help. She also had strangulation marks on her neck. There were deep wounds on her arms, apparently received during the struggle. The keys were found next to the body, and it later turned out that the girl used them to fight back. Sunglasses were also found near the victim of the attack, and her mobile phone was in her jacket pocket. A bicycle was also abandoned not far from the scene. The audacity and brutality of the attack were horrifying, as the crime was committed in broad daylight in a public place. The police continued to collect data and found out that the girl was wearing a fitness bracelet at the time of the run. The gadget recorded heart rate, which was used to clarify the circumstances of death. The young teacher was experiencing erratic heartbeat fluctuations, and GPS data indicated that she was standing still. Apparently at that moment the teacher was attacked and was fighting for her life, and at 15:31 her heart stopped beating. The next step was for police to look for footage from CCTV cameras located in the area. Law enforcement officials analyzed more than 25,000 hours of video recordings that were collected from all surrounding video surveillance systems. Several cameras immediately showed footage of an unknown man exactly matching the description of the witnesses, riding a bicycle in the canal area. At 1:53 p.m., the cyclist stopped, reached into his pocket, and pulled out an object. It was clear that the suspect was holding and twirling something in his hand, but the low quality of the recording made it impossible to understand what exactly it was. Of course, investigators assumed that he took out a knife, which he subsequently used to kill the innocent teacher. The forensic expert determined that the girl was killed with a small serrated penknife, as it left ragged edges on the wounds. Unfortunately, none of the cameras provided a high-quality image that would allow the criminal's face to be identified. A few hours after the attack, a suspect was arrested and identified by local residents. Gerriot Keegan is a 35-year-old migrant of Romanian origin who has lived in Ireland for 23 years and has no criminal record. The man looked similar to the criminal from the CCTV footage. In addition, he was near the crime scene around the same time. While investigators were questioning him, police obtained a search warrant and conducted a thorough search of his home. As a result, nothing was found that would indicate his guilt. Meanwhile, Gerriot continued to insist that there had been a mistake and provided an alibi to support his words, which was confirmed. The suspect's fingerprints and DNA samples were taken and compared to skin particles found under the victim's fingernails and on the bicycle, but no matches were found, conclusively establishing the suspect was not involved in the crime. The man was acquitted and released. The case received wide publicity throughout the country. Local residents were outraged by such a brutal attack on Ashling and demanded that the police quickly find and bring to justice the criminal, who took the life of a young, beautiful, and successful girl with impunity. For several days, the police were unable to obtain any useful information and followed up on all leads received from concerned locals, but the case soon took a completely new turn. On the evening of the next day after the attack, a 33-year-old man named Josef Puska was taken to the hospital. He was admitted to a Dublin hospital complaining of abdominal injuries. Josef was from a small village in Slovakia. He spent most of his life in the Czech Republic, working as a laborer on construction sites. In 2015, Josef and his wife moved to Dublin, Ireland. In the new country, the man continued to work as a builder, and he and his wife had 5 children. The man spoke little Irish and did not know English well enough to communicate with medical staff. Therefore, he needed a translator. Thanks to him, Josef said that on the eve of January 12th, he was in Blanchardstown. There he noticed that 2 men were following him. Since it was in broad daylight, Josef did not attach any importance to it. However, the criminals suddenly attacked him and stabbed him several times in the stomach. The criminals fled, and he barely made it to his home. There he told his family what had happened and called an ambulance. Doctors actually found cuts on his hands, characteristic of defensive actions. The victim also had multiple stab wounds to the abdomen. Josef was kept in the hospital for several days to recover. Naturally, as part of the protocol, doctors notified the police about the incident. So they came to the medical facility to communicate with the victim of another attack. Detectives theorized that the perpetrator who attacked Ashling may have subsequently attacked the man. However, the more law enforcement officials talked to Josef, the more suspicious this story sounded. Josef was confused, could not remember obvious things, and was clearly nervous. Detectives began to wonder if he could be the same man who killed Ashling. The next day, the police came to the hospital again to continue the questioning. The policeman asked if Josef had a bicycle. The man replied that he did have a bicycle, but it had been stolen more than 2 weeks ago. However, the man did not report this incident to the police, which looked suspicious. After this, according to police, Josef became noticeably nervous. Detectives believed that Josef closely resembled the man seen on CCTV on the day of the murder. They also found out that he was indeed near the canal during the commission of the crime. Around 6 p.m. that same day, detectives obtained a search warrant for his home, which allowed them to inspect the apartment and take away the suspect's clothes and mobile phone for examination in the laboratory. Josef received a call to inform him of this. He clearly suspected something and directly asked the police if he was a suspect in some crime. Josef then turned to the translator and asked him to accurately convey his words to the policeman. Josef said that he killed the girl by the canal, but insisted that he did it unintentionally and that it was an accident. The man told investigators was riding his bike along a path and came across a girl he didn't know. He had a knife in his hand. He accidentally hit her on the neck, losing her balance. She was angry and Josef was scared. Ashling allegedly stabbed her attacker in the stomach with something resembling a stabbing object, likely a knife. According to the suspect, he was forced to defend himself. The man drew the attention of the police officers to the fact that he received several blows from her with a knife in the stomach, and is in this case the victim. On January 18th, Joseph was discharged from the hospital and immediately arrested on suspicion of murder. However, Joseph subsequently changed his testimony and retracted his confession. Despite this, the prosecution believed he was the only person who could have harmed Ashling that day. The prosecution intended to seek the maximum sentence for the offender, and a preliminary trial date was set for June 2023, but has since been briefly postponed several times. It was only in October 2023 that the prosecution was able to present the essence of what happened to the jury. The prosecutor showed CCTV footage of an attacker who closely resembled the defendant riding along a path near a canal for several hours. His behavior was typical of a predator choosing prey. Forensic scientists found traces of DNA under the victim's fingernails. The tissue samples were a complete match to Joseph's DNA, and his fingerprints were on the bicycle. All witnesses who saw the man that day identified him as the attacker. Joseph's defense argued that his confession about attacking Ashling was caused by the large dose of painkillers he received in hospital. However, this claim was refuted by doctors. According to doctors, Joseph took only a small amount of painkillers, and at the time of his confession, the painkillers could not have had a strong effect on Joseph's physical and mental state. The prosecution pointed out that Joseph had already changed his testimony several times. However, there were problems in this case. Before this incident, the defendant had never been convicted of violence in general, and especially against women. No one noted the man's tendency towards aggression and cruelty. He had no connection with Ashling, and therefore the motive for the attack itself was in question. However, the man was captured on CCTV footage, which turned out to be the most reliable evidence. It was also confirmed that the bicycle found near the crime scene did indeed belong to Joseph. The trial lasted 3 weeks. After the jury was presented with the arguments of the prosecution and defense, as well as all the materials, 12 people returned their verdict. After 3.5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Joseph guilty of murdering Ashling Murphy. For this crime, he received life imprisonment without parole. The circumstances of the girl's murder shocked the whole country. A few days after the massacre, pickets were held in support of the victim's family. The incident also made headlines around the world. During the investigation, the police proved that the man attacked Ashling for no apparent reason, that he did not know her but turned out to be a hunter who had been looking for a victim for several hours. The young teacher, unfortunately, was in the wrong place at the wrong time and fell into the clutches of a monster in human form. Thank you for your attention. Subscribe to the channel and click on the bell so as not to miss new videos.